you know, they
You
drink
do
a lot
stuff
of
that. Okay, we're going to begin. We're going to begin. Brandon is here already, folks. Welcome to the Dave and Ed podcast.
Is it recording?
We are recording now.
Tonight we have Brandon Cole, writer, filmmaker, Renaissance man, very handsome man. Welcome, Brandon. Welcome to the podcast, the Dave and Ed podcast.
Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, I think you're handsome.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're handsome too. I'm pleased to be here, guys. It's been a while. I haven't seen you, so
Thanks,
catch
man.
up.
Great to see you.
Let's get straight into it. Tell us about the early days. You were born in Chicago, is that correct? Illinois.
Yeah. For 2 years, and then we moved. My family moved to Westchester County.
Okay.
I grew up outside of New York City. Lived there for about 30 years,
You lived in Westchester for 30 years.
more or less, with some traveling around. Yeah.
Right. What town?
It was in Yonkers, but I had a Scarsdale address because the borders there are blurred. You know.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So if I say Yonkers, people think, you know, it's sort of a low class thing. But if I say Scarsdale, they think you're probably wealthy and Jewish or something, and it doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Right.
Just you know, an address.
Of course, yeah. Although Scarsdale is pretty, you know, it's pretty ritzy nowadays. Ritzy, yeah.
Well, it's
Was it ritzy? Was it ritzy then? It wasn't really ritzy then.
No, it was. I mean, it's a wealthy enclave for commuters to New York City and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
You know, big houses. houses.
And did you go to high school in Scarsdale, Yonkers area?
I went to the Yonkers school system.
How was
Nice.
that? Did you like that? Did you like school? Did you hate school? What, were you a rebel?
Well, you know,
We don't know. That's why we're asking.
Oh, it had its good times and its bad times, man. When I had a good teacher, it was okay, but sometimes my behavior created some problems. So I had to be disciplined.
Yes.
Yeah.
For doing what?
Well, the earliest thing I can remember was I was playing, you know, sports or something, recess or something, and I was saying things like "fuck yeah" and "come on, fuck," and they really took me to task for that. It was fourth grade.
Right.
Got in front of the class and said, you know, you don't talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
It had an effect on me.
Right.
I think that was the beginning of my my tendency to be suspicious of authority.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Were your parents very involved in your life growing up?
Yeah, my parents were. Yeah, they were excellent. They sacrificed for the kids. You know, they came from that kind of background. They said I went to private school for 2 years. They got me a scholarship in a local private school because they didn't think the education I was getting was sufficient.
Right.
They did that kind of thing, and they weren't wealthy. Both of my parents they were high school teachers, so but they put their money into their kids. You know, they cared about it.
Yeah.
Did either of those parents instill a love of literature? Like where did you know?
Yeah, well, my mother. I mean, they're both English teachers, so my mother had me reading, you know, Faulkner when I was about 9 or 10 years old. Something called "As I Lay Dying," and she gave me Dostoyevsky. I thought, what the hell is going on with these books?
Yeah.
Okay.
It opened up a world where I was beginning to question my awareness,
Right.
and I began to understand that not only there were a lot of things I didn't know, but there was a lot of stuff that I had to learn, and that was my parents who put that in me.
Right.
And I'm still living it. So this is going to be a short conversation, man. I mean, you're going to find out, like, I don't know. I just keep saying, I have no idea, man.
You were doing fantastic.
This is great.
And your mother was of Italian descent, and your father was Russian descent, Jewish?
Well, we don't know, because my parents were socialists, you know. They didn't raise us. We had no religion. We had no ethnicity. My mother was Italian, huh?
Sorry, go ahead. Keep going. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Okay.
I was just going to ask, were you reading Marx and Lenin then at an early age?
No, it's ridiculous. My father went to CCNY right during the 30s, and he was a leftist, and he had the complete works of Lenin. on
Yes.
a bookshelf wrapped in brown paper because my parents in the 50s were concerned that, this was the anti-communist crap that somebody,
Sure.
the complete works of Lenin. You know how many books that is? That's like
It's a
15.
lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's like this long. And it's wrapped in brown paper so nobody would know. And I've tried to read Lenin. I have read Lenin and Marx.
What about Trotsky?
Yeah, I've read Trotsky. Back then, I was in my 20s. But mostly I like Marx
Right.
because I think he had a compassion for people.
Okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Cool. So like,
And I still think that,
yes.
in case anybody wants to, take it.
No. I think
Oh, put it out there. This is the platform. to
this is
put
the
it out.
platform to put it out.
Yeah.
Personally, I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. So like, then you went to high school, and how was high school? When did you first fall in love and all that stuff? Were you getting into fights as a kid? Were you that kind of a guy? Were you
No.
No.
No,
You're
I'm
more
not.
sensitive.
No. I'm not a fighter. I played sports and all that. I played football and basketball. But,
Okay.
yeah, sexually, I'd have to say I was. It was a long time that I was. It just wasn't happening,
Right.
So my younger brother, who was kind of a take charge kind of guy.
Sure. Oh yeah, Randall.
Yeah, Randall, who he was like taking care of everything. He takes care of everything.
Yeah, sure. The
He
business
took me, and he's 2 years younger than I am, but he took me to see one of his girlfriends one day, and she had a friend of hers there, and she kissed me, and that was the first time I'd ever been kissed, and I had to think about that. I mean, really, kind of.
You had to think about it before you did it, or afterwards.
Well, both, but particularly afterwards, because I thought that it had changed me.
Yeah, right. Well, it was a huge experience. It's a huge milestone in your life, I'm sure. Your first kiss, right?
I don't think that it can be interesting to anybody. I mean, this
Well,
has
I
to be.
think it- well,
Everybody
I
goes
think
through
it-
this stuff, man. What?
So,
It confirmed that you were not homosexual.
yeah, exactly.
No.
Well,
Or
look, I mean, those kinds of thoughts pass through my mind, certainly at times, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And seriously so. But, to me, it's, I mean, have you guys read Marcuse and stuff like that? No?
Back in the day,
yeah. But we didn't, me too, but I didn't digest it back in the day. So,
Why do you bring him up?
Well, because sexuality is a central concern of mine, and how people express it, especially how I express it. And to me, to try to slide it into any specific expression is it's unwarranted.
Yeah.
You can make a choice and behave that way and see how it works. And for me, it's worked out okay. I'm pretty comfortable with being heterosexual, I have to say. I mean, I like females. So
yeah, it's okay to be straight, right?
yeah, I would advise it as a certainly something to consider when people are at any kind of situation where they have a choice. I would say, yeah, you should think about that.
When did you start? Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
So after you graduated high school, you went to college. You went to Sarah Lawrence in Mount Vernon.
No, I did 2 years at a place called Tufts University in Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, Tufts
Small
in Boston.
liberal arts school.
Right.
It's really, it was really a total waste of my time. I spent 2 years there.
Doing what?
I wasn't. I mean, if you don't have a major, they shove you into English.
Uh-huh.
So, but they had all these required courses. Something like, I took a course in Shakespeare. It's met at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was a lecture hall of about 150 people.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to read all of Shakespeare's plays. I thought it was preposterous.
Right.
That was one of my telling experiences. But they also had certain subjects that you had to study at this college to get a degree, right? You had to go through, you had to study like basic science or something. And I don't really have anything to do with mathematics and science.
Yeah.
So it began to dawn on me that I was not being educated here.
Right.
I wasn't going to blame them. Maybe it was my fault, but in any case,
Yeah.
I was acquiring debts and stuff like that and spending this money, and I wasn't getting anything out of it, zero.
Uh-huh.
So it was the Vietnam War, and
Oh,
my
yeah.
brother had just gotten a conscientious objector status. And if I left college, I'd probably have to deal with something about the war, even though I had a high number. So I got a conscientious objector status and did 2 years in a Boston hospital to do my service. And that was 2 of the best educational experiences of my life.
Wow.
The folks there were mostly African-American, was all low-paying jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and they just taught me things. I mean, this one black lady, she was so sweet. There was a bunch of us there, CEOs and stuff. She said, you know, you can talk to your friend. You know, he's not really my friend, but he's just a white guy. So, you know, can you just see if he can take a shower more often? I mean, he's just. And I didn't catch on. I said, you know, because these people think that black people, you know, back then, they're just so ignorant and viciously biased to think that black people have an odor or something like that. I had no clue that this lady was teaching me that this is something that occurs in the world, regardless of who you are. Lovely, lovely people.
Mm.
And generous, attentive, and experienced. And just by being around them, I began to be able to consider that maybe there was a way of life that I could possibly find that was going to be okay for me.
Mm.
How did you like Boston?
Yeah, Boston's okay. Boston was fine. Boston, I was doing drugs all the time, man. I was in a hospital. I could get drugs all the time. I could get Demerol. I could get, I mean, anything. We did, you know, I was pretty much smoking pot all the time and doing mescaline or acid or stuff like that, which I could have done in college.
Sure, sure.
And gotten nothing out of college. But here it was okay. I'd go to work, make my $85 a week or something, pay the rent, and have money left over to fuck around.
Did you have fun doing drugs?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't do them anymore, but that's just,
Right.
Yeah, did a lot.
This would have been the late 60s, right?
Yeah, I went to college in 66, 68, and I worked in a hospital in 68 to 70, and then I went back to college. That's why I went to Sarah Lawrence in 70. I went back to school.
Yeah.
And graduated in 72.
Can you talk about what was happening in the United States of America during the late 60s?
Early, yeah.
And how it affected you and what you saw in terms of, you know, the news, society, you know?
Well, look, the Vietnam War was, it was a criminal war. You know, these people should be prosecuted. It was like the war in Iraq. You can't just go around invading these countries, and these people are getting away with all this stuff, and people are getting killed.
Right.
I got to say that in my neighborhood, I don't know anybody. It's an upper middle class, mostly Jewish neighborhood. I don't know anybody who served in that war. So who are these people getting killed? Working class kids.
Yeah.
Some kids who are so misguided as to think they're fighting for something that's worth getting yourself seriously injured at least for.
Right.
Not people I knew. People I knew, didn't touch them at all. But it was certainly something that it influenced my thinking, but also the way I behaved.
Yeah. Do you remember the presidential election in 1968 or the campaign? Do you remember that time when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated?
Yeah, I remember all that stuff. Yeah. And Eugene McCarthy and Johnson and stuff. The terrible thing for me was that, I mean, in retrospect, not at the time, but in retrospect, you had a person like Johnson who put in social programs doing lasting good, like Medicare, Medicaid. And then he does this war. It's hard to put those two
contradictions.
those two sides together for me.
Right.
But at the time, there was no question. I mean, look, I was working carpentry one time with a guy who fought in the Korean War. And I asked him about that. And he said, because, you know, Harry Truman's popularity rating was the lowest in history. And when you think about some of the presidents, and even the president we have today, when you think about the popular rating that these people have had, and you think about someone like Harry Truman, who wanted to have health care back then, his popularity rating was down around 13%. Due, I can only conclude, but to the Korean War. And this guy, who was a decent guy, said to me when he was over there, he said, the president is trying to get me killed. That's what his impression was. That was his assessment. I'm not here to change the world or to fight some communist. I'm not different. He's trying to get me killed. Okay? Sends me over here. And man, and it's still going on, you know?
Sure.
So yeah, those period, that time. Look, I went to demonstrations in Washington in the early 70s when there was a strike at Columbia. I was, attended those things.
Right.
Partly because, look, I didn't fit in. I got to say, I went to college. I went to Sarah Lawrence College to study creative writing. Okay.
Right.
It shows you how much I knew. Like, you're going to teach creative writing here. This is, this school is it's kind of a free for all. I mean, you can major in, I don't know, violin there if you want.
Uh-huh.
You don't have any requirements whatsoever. You can study whatever you want, and just put together whatever program you want. But I thought there was such a thing as creative writing, and that's why I went.
Okay. Yeah.
And I took 2 semesters of it, and that was it. I was fed up.
Wow.
I mean, they were treating me as if I knew something.
Right.
Interesting.
What TV shows did you watch in the 1970s? Did you watch The Streets of San Francisco with Michael Douglas and Carol Malden? Did you? No? Okay. Right. Next question.
So, yeah, well, I guess you kind of answered I was wondering when you first started to write. So, doing this creative writing program in Sarah Lawrence, were you writing before that?
I was, that's why I went.
Did they influence you negatively or positively, these people?
No, not at all. One of the teachers was fine. I studied the second semester. I studied with a guy who became extremely well known and renowned and celebrated even.
Wow.
And he struck me as a guy who was just so pleased with himself. So I go, man, this cannot be. There should be something.
Could you name
a writer? Should be something.
What's his name? Can you name him?
I can. He's dead. His name was E.L. Doctorow.
Okay. Oh, yeah, Doctorow. Yes. Yeah. Very good. Wow.
That was enormously famous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did all these things, movies and Broadway and everything. But to me, I think that there's a lot of stuff that goes out there that it's just not to my liking.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So
go ahead.
Go for it.
Oh, I was wondering about day jobs. After college. What's that?
I always had a job.
Right. So talk to us about the variety of day jobs you had. You apparently worked.
Can you not be so defensive about
it? So you worked at a refrigeration plant in Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah, I did. A friend of mine was
you were in the CIA out there. Isn't that why you were out?
That play I wrote.
That's why you don't like Doctor.
That play I wanted you guys to do, Jamie's Gang.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Well, it's still on the cards.
Yes.
You know?
I would like to think so.
Yeah.
Anyway, that
Mike
guy.
Cox, if you're watching this, we need you to play his dad.
My dad. Yeah.
In Jamie's Gang.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hostile comedy. Anyway, it was based on that my friend and his father, and the father was a retired iron worker. He had connections over to Saudi Arabia and had to put together a crew. So that's how I went over there. That was in 74, 75, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We worked 6.5 days a week. Lived in trailers.
Wow.
We got paid in cash in Switzerland. And I wanted to take another job. but I'd had enough. So I said that I took my money and got on a train for Paris. And I
Wow.
arranged with Janice to come over and meet me. So I think I got like, I don't know, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 in cash at the time. I was walking around it with my pants. I was keeping my hands in my pocket. It was all the $100 bills, but it was a lot of money to me.
Sure.
How was Saudi Arabia? How was life there?
Well, it was a prison camp because we couldn't move. I mean, we had to stay where we were. I think we had half a day off a week. And I don't think, I mean, maybe we went into the local town once and it was all armed guards and stuff that we weren't allowed to move around. But this is in the 70s. It was,
Yeah.
you know, I think it's different now.
So you escaped and you made your way to Paris, and did your girlfriend at the time was Janice, and she joined you in Paris.
Yeah. There was the airlines called Laker Airlines at the time. You could fly over for $100.
Wow.
But she flew to London and took the ferry and then came down to Paris.
Okay.
She always wanted to go to Paris.
Sorry, let's back up a little. When did you meet Janice? And tell us the romance, how you fell in love and all that stuff.
Really?
Yeah,
Really,
we
really,
got a
yeah.
lot of viewers who love this kind of thing.
Yes.
You guys got a lot of time on this, man. This is going to go on and on, man.
Yeah.
It's she was a girlfriend of a friend of mine in high school.
Oh, classic.
Yeah. So we all went up to Boston together, and they broke up, and then she and I hit it off. But then when I went to Sarah Lawrence, she took off with a guy and went traveling across the country and ended up in Mexico for a couple of years. And then I was living at home with my mother. I was in my late 20s. And I used to have one day a week. I was reading during the day and writing in the afternoons. Take one day a week, I'd come into the city and go to the Metropolitan Museum. It's for my day. Well, I like being around that place. Anyway, I was looking at a Rembrandt self-portrait. This is the story, and it's true. Because I would just go there for a few minutes, you know, look at his face. And Janice came in to the room. I didn't know, she was around. So that's when we picked it up again.
Cool.
And, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, come on, Dave.
How long did you spend in Paris when you left
Yes.
Saudi Arabia?
Well, I'm look, I think all these cities deserve attention. I first traveled to Italy in, I think 73 after I'd gotten off a carpentry job. I had some money. So I went over by myself and vagabonded through the country, even to Sicily and stuff. So I usually get in a place like Rome or Paris or something like that. I don't want to stay there for a while. If you read the books, they'll tell you can't do these cities in less than 3 weeks. Even that's too long. So we stayed in Paris probably 3 weeks or something like that. Going to museums and eating cheaply and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we went south. We took trains and we went to. Basically, I took Janice to the capitals of Europe. Is what I did. We went to Rome and then we went back to London and stuff like that. Florence. And
So while you were living with your mom for 5 years, right? This is in the mid 70s, late 70s, or? Is that correct?
yeah, from say 75 to 81 or 82, 76 to 82. Yeah.
So this is when you began writing plays?
Well, no, I'd written a play. I moved to New York when I got back from Alaska. I moved to New York and I was driving a taxi cab
Oh wow!
and reading and writing.
Wow, driving a taxi cab in the 70s, 80s in New York. That I hear from other older people that I've spoken to. That no, you're shaking your head. Okay.
Yellow, was it a yellow cab?
Yeah. Yeah, I was.
You knew where to go with that question. Was it intense? There was no violent altercations?
I never had anything like that. I'd already driven a cab in Boston when I was working at the hospital. I'd also driven a cab in Scarsdale when I was living at home or something. So for me, driving a cab was just driving a car. So, but I was driving days because I was concerned about, something happening.
Sure.
Something
Yeah.
happening.
What kind of a cab was it? What kind of a car? Was it a Chevrolet or a Ford?
Some kind of shitty Chevy. I mean, those things were, most of the cars, those were I drove for a fleet, and
Right.
those things back then, they weren't monitored as they are now, so they were pretty rattly.
Yeah.
And depending on who you were, you got a better car or worse car. So I didn't care about any of that stuff. But the one thing that I did learn was I was coming out of a shift one day. I guess we got off around 4, and I saw a lady going in, young woman. And I said, "No, you drive at night? Yeah, you make a lot of money at night." And she gave me the boost, and that's when I started driving at night. And she was right, but it was her
Yeah.
to do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're not so different, huh? Guys and gals, not so different.
Absolutely.
Right.
So tell us about how you met Tetsuro. You were doing construction for his dad, is that correct?
No. I'd written a play. I saw some. Look, I was living at home with my mother or something, and my mother was cool. She was fine, but her friends, like she had pretty kind of unfortunate choice of friends. They were school teachers, and I would say pretty limited in what they consider to be acceptable.
Right.
Like, you're not going to be against your country, right? You're not going to be like that, right? Really? And you're going to live at home? Well, how long are you going to be here? These are the kinds of statements I would hear. Anyway, my mother was a pal of mine, and she took an interest in me. And she would say to me to go do something. It's like there was an Andy Warhol screen. She'd say, "Go see it. Go over there. Take your brothers and go." Back then there were some movies of plays that was being done. I think it was done by PBS. Plays like The Homecoming by Pinter and Butley, and with Alan Bates. When I saw those, that was a revelation, especially The Homecoming.
Right.
And that's sort of started the beginning of, although I'd written a play before that was mostly based on Brecht kind of influence. But that Pinter's writing was something that, which I think in Butley has the same flavor. But Pinter's writing struck me as, it's just so lively,
Yeah.
And so when that experience came to me about Jamie's Gang through my relationships with this friend of mine and his father, I kind of wrote it real fast, like maybe less than a month.
Wow.
And then I had it, and I thought I'd go around and show it to the theaters because they were playing at that time Pinter's plays and stuff. I thought, well, you're playing his play, you should do mine. So that's what I was thinking at the time, really.
Sure.
Go to a Broadway house and go in. I went to Samuel French, the publisher of plays. I went to his office.
Oh, wow.
Secretary said, "No, he's not here." Anyway, that's what I was doing. I was taking this play around to all the theaters in New York, and everybody turned me down.
Wow.
Everybody.
Wow.
This guy who just died, this guy, Win Handman, which has gotten,
Win Handman
Handman
just passed away.
Just
right?
died, yeah.
Yeah.
he's got a lot of, and it's terrible, I know, to say anything about somebody who's dead. But I'll tell you this experience because it shows what I was going through, okay? I was going around to all these theaters, and all of them, I mean, I'm talking about black boxes. I'm not talking about the American Place Theater or La Mama or anything like that. I'm talking about
The legit stuff.
off stuff,
All right.
storefront. No. So I go to American Place Theater and with my play, and I want to give it, and I went to the public theater too.
Yeah.
And and they said no. And Win Handman was coming out. We were in the elevator area, and I said, I want to show you my play. And he said, "Well, I don't have time right now."
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the elevator didn't come. So I said, "Well, the elevator isn't coming, so."
Brilliant.
Those are the kinds of experiences I was going through.
Right.
Right. So that left you with no alternative but to what? Like just put things on yourself?
Well, what happened was I was going down to this place called the 13th Street Playhouse. It's right on 13th Street near the Quad Cinema. I think it's still there. They were famous for Israel Horowitz.
13th Street Rep or something?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what it is. But they did the Indian Wants the Bronx.
Oh, yeah, Chino.
Yeah, I think that's where it started years ago. Anyway, Israel Horowitz's stuff was getting done there. And I submitted it, And the lady who was in charge of that place at the time actually had a conversation with me, one of the few. And she said, "Are you against homosexuality?" I'm going like, what the? Because in the play, there's this guy who makes fun of this guy, the father and stuff. I don't know if you guys remember, but the father is concerned that his son's a homosexual.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so he makes fun of him and stuff. And this was their concern. I thought, that is so misguided. That's just so
Stupid.
it really is.
Yeah.
Did you read the play? Really?
I've read it and I can say categorically it's not homophobic.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, how can you be that way? How could anybody be that way? Anyway. So at that theater, somebody said to me, there's a group that's looking for plays.
Okay.
And that's how I met Turturro, because he was in that group. So I went to meet these guys, and they were all a little younger than I was. I was probably about 30 at the time. They were probably just getting out of college. They're about 23.
Right.
And they liked it. So
they liked Jamie's gang specifically?
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only play I had at the time, and Turturro played the role I want, the Jesse character, the kind of rebellious.
Right.
So you actually did a production in this, or was it just like?
We did. Yeah.
Cool.
We did. They were a group of people. They had they had a group. There was a director.
Mm-hmm.
There was a set designer. So we rented a storefront that had a theater in the back. I was also doing another show, so we would do it 3 times a week. And then we had to take our set down, and then the other show would come in, and then we put our set back up and stuff.
Right.
And pretty much I put up all the money. We were supposed to put it up together, but pretty much I put it all up. It wasn't much. It was like $1,500 or maybe $2,000, something like that. But it was a total failure. Nobody came. We had, shows where even we had friends, and nobody came. It was like 6 people in the audience.
Wow.
It was discouraging as hell because I thought the play was pretty good.
And this was before Turturro made a name for himself?
Yeah, before.
Turturro was teaching Catholic school in Harlem at the time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They called him Mr. T.
Mr. T. Okay.
Wow.
He had some funny kids. But I'll tell you, the one thing that ended for me, when that thing was over, I was so discouraged. I didn't want to see anybody.
Right.
I just cut everybody off, nothing. I didn't want to talk to anybody, see anybody, nothing. And Turturro called me up. And he said, "You can't just go away." And then that really affected me.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when we started, starting our friendship.
Cool.
Because he had no money. He was living with his girlfriend, and she was really giving him a hard time. And he's trying to get an agent. And this is before I went to Yale. So I got my mother. I said, "Look, maybe he can come out and do some work around the house," because we had this big house, like 11 rooms or something. And it had all these areas, that needed painting and crap. So she hired him for the summer or something to come out there and we'd work on fixing shit up together.
Cool.
Which, it made a difference at the time. Because he was, I had resources. I came from resources.
Right.
I could find help if I needed.
Right.
John didn't come from that kind of situation.
Right. Right.
He kind of had to scrap a lot.
Mm-hmm.
As we all have to.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So then after Jamie's Gang, like when did you write Imperfect Love, or were there other plays around that time? Before?
No, there was, because John had, and those guys who came out of Newport's drama, Michael Badalucco's another one. Yes. They had a connection with a theater down in the West Village called the West Beth. And there's 2 theaters down there, I think, at least there were at the time. One was more like a real theater, and this other one was just this huge space. And they knew the guy who ran it, and he'd give us to it in the summer when nobody wanted it for free. We'd split the box. And Turturro had this idea. He had this experience that he wanted to work on. He didn't know what it was. It was just 3 pages of dialogue he showed me. I don't know if I told you this story already, no?
No.
Well, our viewers haven't heard
Yeah.
Anyway, he had 3 pages of dialogue, and it was his uncles and his father talking in the kitchen.
it. Yes.
And he said, I think there's something here. Would you mind looking at it? And I'll tell you something about the tour. I mean, the guy has a really sweet side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think you see it so much these days, but back then, there was something extremely tentative about it,
Right.
and something self-effacing, and
Yeah.
it was endearing. I said, sure, let's see. So I get these 3 pages of dialogue, and I mean, it's like working class people. I don't know what I'm going to do with this thing.
Yeah.
It's just talking about, their relationships and stuff. And from that, we began to work on what became a play called Steel on Steel, which eventually becomes the movie Mac 12 years later.
Right.
Right.
But that's where it started.
Which yeah.
And to do that, I'll just finish it quickly, though. I mean, because I think it's important
Yes.
to take something like that, which is, it's just a suggestion, really, and to try to make it into something. That's if that can happen, it's pretty fortunate,
Yeah, absolutely. And like the film version, of course, won the Cannes, an awarded Cannes, the Cannes Camera d'Or, 1992.
They won the Camera d'Or in '92, yeah.
Yeah,
That was a $50,000 prize, too, man.
$50,000. Wow.
Yeah, which we used for Illuminata. But to finish it, just this may interest somebody, but there were 4 characters that Turturro had. His father had 3 brothers. So the first thing I got to do is I got to compress this. We can't have these 4 guys, maybe 3 we can have, okay? Because they're just not going to be that interesting,
Mm-hmm.
At least I don't know how to do it. So when we broke it down to 3, we had, one was a painter that was based on his uncle, Damen. One was a carpenter and kind of a guy who liked parties. That was sort of a combination of his 2 father's brothers, and one was his father. And the names Mac and Bruno and Vico come from Italian history. Mac is Machiavelli, and Bruno is Giambattista Bruno, the rebel who was burned at the stake.
Yeah.
And Vico was Giordano Bruno, and Vico was Giambattista Vico, who wrote The New Science.
Mm.
So this is the kind of research I had to go through. And once it started to happen, it began to become, at least the characters began to become solid. They become bigger than not just carpenters. They became they represented something more. They represented a practical approach to life that had to be harsh. It was harsh, and that's Mac. And it represented rebelliousness, which was the artist, the Bruno character, and it represented, kind of just a good guy, a solid, down to earth. You can rely on this guy who fucks off a little bit and likes to go out and drink and chase women and stuff like that. But I've always considered that guy what I call the salt of the earth. He was just, that kind of mix was an uneasy grouping, but it was holding together. That was the story. That how can you take some people who come in, because John's father was born in Italy.
Yeah.
How can you take these people who come in and pretty much their lives are going to be predetermined? They're going to work in construction, and that's it,
Mm-hmm.
They'll get by okay, but that's about all.
Right.
And his father had bigger plans. He wanted to form a company with his brothers who he cared about very much. That was his goal. And I thought, this is worth trying to capture. That this guy wants to do something, not just for himself because he likes to be around his brothers, but also for, his family. Without becoming all Italian and, we're going to have pasta, mozzarella and all this stuff. No, but, if I'm holding a board, you're going to hold the other end, right? And you're going to cut it to the right size and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
really make things happen.
Can you talk to us about what it was like to win an award at Cannes?
For that movie.
Well,
Talk to us about that.
Mac, yeah.
well, look,
How was the acclaim? Did you like the acclaim?
No, because look, the story with this film, look, you know, we wrote the script for Mac, and we didn't know anything. At the time, I was really a playwright. I hadn't written screenplays. I hadn't even studied anything about it. I thought I was too good to study screenwriting. Which I wised up after a while. But at the time, Totoro and I, we wrote the screenplay together, and it was 162 pages long.
Wow.
Okay?
Epic.
And we took it around.
Yeah.
And because John was starting to get some attention, he'd done
Barton Fink, Miller's Crossing, right?
Yeah.
he did Miller's Crossing.
Yeah.
In Miller's Crossing, he's got that scene that reminds me of the scene with Timothy Carey in what's the name? Paths of Glory. When he's screaming, "I don't want to die." The Totoro does something like that in the forest, and it was
Yes. Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
exceptional.
Brilliant.
But at that time, we were going around to meeting people, like real people. Totoro, Pakula was one of those people, but also Harvey Weinstein was one of those people, Jane Rosenthal. But we also met a guy named Ben Barinholtz. Now, Ben Barinholtz produced the three Coen Brothers pictures, and he turned us down. Okay,
Right.
even though at this time I'm not sure exactly what the positions are, but even though at that time Totoro may have won Best Actor at Cannes for Barton Fink,
Right.
but he still turned us down, I think. But because Totoro won that Best Actor, he had cachet with them, with Cannes. So he was going to submit Mac to them, and he was going to go for the camera door. I mean the palm door. But they suggested he go for the camera door. And I thought the whole thing was fantastic to me. I mean, just, it's unheard of. I mean, I wasn't really involved in this world. John was. But I'd also seen that the producers at that time were kind of self-aggrandizing. And it was very clear to me that this project owed everything. Not just a little bit, not, everything to Totoro. It's his film. That's it. So for me, I would not be around that so much. I was there. John had 2 first-class tickets, which he sold, and he changed them all into coach fares. So a lot of us went over there. But so far as presenting the film went, it wasn't John Turturro and Brandon Cole. No, it's John Turturro. That's it. To the point where at the night of the ceremony, I really kind of, as I say, I didn't take this place. I mean, I thought it was a little bit overdone, frankly. But I didn't go to the ceremony that night.
Oh,
And that's what we win. That's what he won. I found out the next day. So, but, to me, there's 2 things, really. There's the acceptance, which we all need. And then there's the efforts that we put into the piece. And those efforts were significant for that piece.
okay.
Yeah.
But again, it was John. He carried that piece. To give you an example, we did this play at Westbeth. Then we did it at the 63rd Street Y because we had a connection there. That was 2. We first did it as a 3-act piece, then we did it as a 2-act piece. Then we did it as a 1-act at Ensemble Studio Theater.
Okay.
And that was all through John's connections. So John was keeping this project alive from 1980 all the way to, this would be about 1991, when, because he won, as soon as he won Best Actor at Cannes, we had the money to do the film. Before that, nothing. Same script, nothing. Then we had the money. And I think it was about $2 million. 2.2 million. And I got 50 grand for that, which to me was enormous. I was making $150 a day in construction at that time.
Right.
But,
wow. So
I don't know.
if we could go back to like when you wrote Imperfect Love, which is a classic piece that of course starred Dave and I a couple of years ago, but you originally done that and you were shopping that around as well. Is it true that Joe Papp was thinking of doing it for a little bit?
Yeah, I met with Joe Papp because I knew a lady who worked over there named Morgan Janess. Yeah, I'd written the first act, so I had it done. And by the way, I want to do this again. You know, I haven't stopped thinking about it. It's just a question of how to possibly do it.
Right.
Because I think it's really all my fault that it's not. We had a good show there. I mean, Janice talks about it. You know, my wife talks about it to this day that I really let everybody down by not being able to get this thing to go on longer. But it just, you know, I tried to set up as best I could, but.
Yeah.
Well, but back in the day, though. Sorry, go on, Dave. Yeah. Back in the day, tell us about trying to get it done back in when you wrote it. Actually. Yeah.
Because of my experiences in the theater, they were, the theater and working with the folks I began to work with was Turturro and Badalucco, and you know, someone like Aidan Quinn, and Stanley Tucci, and I don't know, others along the way, but mostly Turturro and Badalucco, I have to say. I was connected to something for the kind of the first time since my childhood, you know, and I wanted to. This is what I wanted to do if I could. So I had something happen because I had these theatrical experiences, and I came across I've said this before, but I came across a praise from Pirandello about this Italian actress I'd never heard of, in Eleanor Duse. So somehow some dialogue came to me, and I began to look into her life, and I thought there was something here that could, for me, do justice to what I consider to be the huge benefits that come from theatrical involvement. And I'm not talking about what passes so much that I consider to be frivolous. I'm talking about finding expressions that are appropriate to the moment. And I've seen this happen, and we had it happen in the show we all did together. That to me, for people who are attentive to those sorts of incidents,
and the film version of Imperfect Love is Illuminata, right? Did you direct that?
No, that's the term.
John directed it. Yeah. Did you have any involvement in that, or?
I did. I mean, we wrote it together.
You wrote it, yeah.
It's completely different from the play, though, right? It's, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, because it has to be. I mean, we had 5 characters in the play. I mean, we had 5 characters and 1 set. I mean, I wrote that play that way because I wanted to be able to do it. You know, as cheaply as possible. You know, but with the film, we had to open it up and bring the people we had off stage into the action. You know, whether it's the critics or the theater owners or
Christopher Walken, brilliant.
Yeah, Christopher Walken did a good job, but also Ben Gazzara was in it. Donald McCann,
Susan Sarandon,
Donald McCann. This is somebody that people don't know about.
Yeah, all our favorites.
Yeah.
No, these guys are. This was Turturro who was kind of.
How was that film received? And like, was there any problem getting it done, like financially or whatever? It was.
Yeah, it took a long time because it's expensive. That thing cost over $6 million.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, John and I disagreed about casting, so that's why I sort of drifted away. But
right.
So you must have had a big Hollywood producer, did you, on that film?
There were two companies that pretty much financed it. One was that Australian guy, Icon.
Crocodile Dundee?
No. The guy who played Mad Max, that guy.
Oh, Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson, yeah.
Mel Gibson had a company because I think he just did that Christ movie.
Is he Australian, or I thought he was born in Peekskill, New York? Do you know that? I'm just saying.
He grew up in Australia.
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh, okay. Anyway, that's how I know him.
I've heard of him.
They had all this money because he did this Jesus film, right?
Yeah, he made the Jesus film around then.
Yeah.
They had all this money.
Yeah.
So I think part of that, a good chunk of the budget came from them. And then there was a company called, I forget the name now. I forget the name. We'll put another
Right.
4 million into it or something. But I don't remember why that clicked, because we were looking for money for a long time. I think we finished the screenplay about 94, and it wasn't shot until 97 because we couldn't get the financing. We went traveling on locations. I met joke.
Yeah. Where was the film shot?
It's terrible because we went out on locations. We went to Italy, we went to Sicily, we went to France, we went to Portugal, because it was supposed to be shot at the Teatro Argentina in Rome, or in some theater like that. But because the cast was so big, it was too expensive. Even in Portugal, where it's about 15 or 20% cheaper, was still too expensive. So it was shot in Jersey City, in a former, it was kind of a Catholic school that had a theater that had just been neglected that we took over. Oh, we met Jean Moreau. I don't want to forget Jean Moreau. She's, to me,
Right.
Sure, legend.
talented. But it ended up, not. We ended up not. The film ended up not using her. It's terrible.
You have an affinity with Italy. Is that correct?
I like the Mediterranean.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about Italy, or one of your favorite things about going there and visiting?
I like how people respond.
Right.
I like their facial expressions. I like their diction. I like the way they choose their words and express it physically.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I was in Italy, even when I went to buy some milk in a store, and the sales clerk said something, and at that time I didn't know any Italian at all. I said, yeah, I get this stuff. This is not the United States. These people, they pay attention to who you are. It's important. I was amazed. And it's been that way ever since.
Right.
Wow.
On top of all the other things about it, but that in particular.
It's beautiful.
Mm.
How do you find, like, I'm sure in your life you've just had to, there's been times when you've had to just be like a writer for hire and maybe do projects that you're not so passionate about. Like, how do you navigate that kind of thing?
It's terrible. I've done rewrites. No, it's terrible because I've done rewrites and I've gotten paid.
Right.
Yeah?
Good.
And I can't say, I don't think that any rewrite that I've done has been made into a film. Not one. Okay. I get $40,000 plus health insurance and all this shit. Not one. I did a rewrite. This guy wins the lottery in Mexico. I don't know if I told you guys this story. This guy wins the lottery in Mexico.
In Mexico, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's a CBS correspondent at the Mexico City office. Right? He wins the lottery. He wins like $4 million. And he's a devout Catholic. He wants to do a movie because at that time there was something called the Spitfire Grill that had come out. I don't know if you remember this thing. It was produced by a religious order.
Yeah.
And it was well received and it made money.
Yes.
So there was at this time, I think, some religious people thinking that this was a medium to pay attention to and possibly to use to further the faith, let's say. Now, look, I'm an atheist from forever. But I pay attention to religion. I read Kierkegaard and things like that. But anyway, I knew somebody who recommended me. He recommended about 6 writers to this guy. And they just come off of the director he wanted to use, had just coming off of the shoot called the Vanities or something of the Vanities or something like that.
The Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yeah, the assistant director. So he wanted him to direct this thing because this is the one guy who come out of that experience who came across looking pretty good. Anyway, we meet and all this, and eventually they say, okay. They were shooting. The assistant director was shooting some Tom Cruise Mission Impossible thing in London or something. So they want to fly me over and send us over. This is at this famous studio in England, where all these films were made.
Pinewood.
Yeah, Pinewood Studio. Enormous. All these films come out of that place. I think it was Pine. Anyway, they fly us over to London. Per diem, hotel, whole thing. Janice is having a ball. She just, takes a ride to the country. She meet and talk. And I say, okay, so go back. They make the deal. It's all through the Writers Guild, so covered and all this. And go back and write it. Take the script that we have and do it. Rewrite it. So I do it. Takes me about 6 weeks, maybe 2 months or something. I give it to them, and they call me up. They say, well, we don't like it. I said, well, at this point, I'd been through enough of these things to know that it wasn't me. You don't like it? Well, okay, so that's it.
Right.
No. We want you to come to Mexico. And we want to work with you to do it. So I figure, okay, I'll go to Mexico. Figure I'll go down there for, a couple of days. I ended up spending 6 weeks down there. Okay?
In Mexico City?
No, outside in a place called Ixtapan, in this resort, hot springs. I had a suite of rooms.
Right. Janice
came down. I'd write a scene in the morning. I'd give it to them at lunch, and then we'd come back and have a meeting in the afternoon. And I did that every day. Okay? And I began to catch on. I said, look, guys, this is going on a while now, and I don't think it's going to happen. You got to start thinking practically. Well, we're going to get John Voight to do it. I go, maybe you are, but you really kind of get that in place before you start doing this thing. So, because I'm not so convinced it's going to happen, but that's not me. But anyways, I got to get home, and they come up to New York, so they're still working on it. Okay.
But you're living the dream, though, right? You're getting paid for writing. You're living the dream. Are you not?
Yeah.
I'm writing a story about a guy who is going to find his faith in God. Okay.
Wow.
It's to me.
Autobiographical?
Yeah. It's to me, there's a difference between theme and plot that people have to become, they really got to find what that is, because if you got somebody pursuing something, then you got to have obstacles in the way, and somehow these areas they got to be compelling. They're going to want people going to not pay attention to it, so they've got to hold the audience interest. So I wasn't so sure this was happening, but in any case, it just finished, and that was it. Nowhere. Okay. Zero. And that's just one story of probably 4 or 5.
Go on, please. What is it? There's a lot of. I'm sure there's loads of you've loads of stories like that, like with that documentary "Nobody Wants Your Film," like trying to get movies made independently. Blah blah. But there's one screenplay that you've been working on, I believe, called that, or maybe I don't know how long ago you started working on this, but the script sounds fascinating. A movie called Sex Wrestling. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah. No, I've worked with a director named Alexander Rockwell. Alexander Rockwell.
Yeah, sure.
We've done 3 films together.
13 Moons. Yeah.
Written 5.
Okay Garage, 13 Moons.
No, I did Okay Garage. He did 13 Moons. We did 13 Moons. We did Pete Smalls' Day. We did something called Sons. But Alex came to notice in the early 90s with a film called what's his name? Seymour Cassel. In the Soup.
Seymour Cassel.
He did a film called In the Soup with his wife at the time, Jennifer Beals, and Seymour Cassel. And Steve Buscemi was in it. Nobody knew who Steve Buscemi was at the time.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, it's a story about a writer who's trying to get a film made. It's a comedy and stuff. And it did well at Sundance. I think it won a prize. And from that, Alex got some, he got some notice. So he had some way of getting another film made, which didn't work out so well. But he still had you could still get a film made. So in 2001, we did 13 Moons, which he put together, although we wrote it together, but he really kind of put it together. And then in 2010, we did some Pete Smalls is Dead, which he put together too. And the nice thing about Alex, really, the endearing thing about Alex, the generous thing about Alex is that he'll do this stuff and he's so irresponsible, really. We pulled this off as a student film in California. We had major actors in this thing, okay?
Name
We had
it.
Michael Lerner, we had Buscemi.
Which film is this?
Pete Smalls.
Pete Smalls is Dead, yeah.
And we're going around like, this is a student film. We shot at LA Airport for nothing, because we were students working. I was a professor. But he would do this stuff. Anyway, Alex came up with this idea because an actor told him one time about a touring group that had gone through Europe.
Yes.
So he wanted to do it with dwarfs.
Dwarfs.
Right.
So I don't know if you guys have seen Husbands, I think it is.
Yeah, Cassavetes.
Yeah. I think there's some rough parallel to Husbands because, or maybe it's Mikey and Mickey. Because there's a couple of guys, there's a guy who's got in trouble with gangsters and he's not supposed to come back. So that's the story. But he comes back because he wants to get this tour together. So the gangsters are going to send this friend of his after him. And he's supposed to kill him. That's the story. But that's the kind of, let's say, the grabber. But really, it's a story about this guy taking this group of dwarfs to Albania to do wrestling matches because their goal is to wrestle Leon Spinks, who was a heavyweight champion in the world at the time, or just retired, in Barcelona. So they were going to start in Albania and work their way across Europe, developing their craft. And we went to Albania, to research this thing and stuff.
Wow.
Yes.
But I tried to tell Alex, nobody's going to do this movie. I mean, I even showed it to Peter Dinklage. Peter's worked with Alex and me. Well, Peter worked with me on in Perfect Love when we did it first time, but he's also worked on 2 films with Alex and mine. But he didn't even bother responding to me. I thought he would appeal to him.
Wow.
No, I said, man, Alex, I said, we got to change this. We got to change it to women.
Women dwarfs?
No, this is women.
Right.
Because it's supposed to be sex wrestling. And, the joke is that it was supposed to be 6 wrestlers and then they spelled it wrong, so it became sex wrestling. But,
Gotcha.
Nobody's going to touch it. Man. So I think that conversation is still going on and it hasn't made any progress. But
it's a shame. It sounds really funny and exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny piece. It is. But it's complicated. You have these
Sorry, are you working on anything right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I got this noir I'm doing. And I wrote this noir cop story.
Yes.
You guys have read it, right? No.
We have,
yes,
but the
viewers
and the listeners on all our platforms haven't.
It's called The Rootless, and it's a cop story about a cop in Reno, Nevada who doesn't want to be a cop anymore. So he becomes a private eye at the end of it. But anyway, it's a story about someone going through that transition in his life because he's no longer comfortable with arresting these bad guys because it's hard to figure out who the good guys are these days. So
wow.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a story. But I wrote it as a novella to try to get it published. It didn't happen. But then I wrote a second part of it because someone told me that it would be easier to get it published as a real long novel in 2 parts. And that didn't happen. So I turned it into I just recently turned it into a screenplay with working with Will Patton, the actor I've known for years.
Cool.
Do you have any more questions? Or?
I was just wondering, like, who were your influences? Like, was there any one major influence, dead or alive, people
It's been a lot. I mean, I was fortunate to have a couple of good teachers when I was trying to educate myself. Those were major influences. But in terms of writing,
Yeah, and also were you did you do any playwriting classes or anything like that, or you self-taught? I mean, Aristotle taught you a lot, right?
yeah. No, I flirted with going to Yale for a while, but I just come out of Sarah Lawrence and I visited Yale and I thought, man, this is just another one of those places. You know, it's just everything here. It just strikes me as so fake.
If you went to Yale, you could have become president of the United States.
You know, somebody said, like, who would want that job? You know?
I digress, though.
But I guess, go ahead. You go.
I think one thing I have to say is, I mean, look, there's been so many. And I didn't, studying theater, I read all the textbooks and teaching me how to structure a play and all that stuff's so important. But I'll tell you what was an important influence on me, I guess I have to say, was Beckett.
Wow.
My father had a good bookshelf, and I found his 3 novels there, and I couldn't make head or tail. I really couldn't even begin to understand what this guy was doing. You know, just so foreign to me. And one time, Janice and we used to traipse around, and one time we ended up in Nantucket Island, and we didn't have money. We had only money for food or something, so we're going to sleep outside. We had enough money to go to see, they were doing some regional theater there. They were doing 3 one-acts. One of them was an Edward Albee thing, and the other one was an excerpt from, I guess it's Malloy, which is where the guy has the sucking stones, you know?
Yes.
You got to figure out how to take the stones from one pocket and put them into the other pocket without ever sucking the same stone twice. That's his job, you know? And it goes on for a few pages. And I'd read it, and what the fuck is this about? And then I saw this guy performing on stage. It was, he taught me how to see this, you know?
Cool.
I said, man, this is unbelievable. It's a thought process, and it's so visual and so compelling. How do I get these stones from one pocket to the other without sucking the same stone twice?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Anyway, that was a huge influence that it took me a very long time to leave behind.
I guess my last question would be, have you any advice for young writers out there?
Well, I think it's important, if one calls oneself a writer, as I do now, I think it's important to recognize that it's a position of responsibility. I think there's such a thing called authority, and it's connected to what an author is. And I've never been comfortable with that, but I'm beginning to become more comfortable with it now, that we should write about to what we speak and what we do and what we live. It should come from some place that we are completely convinced about. And are committed to sharing it. And if people don't like it, then they don't like it. Fuck it. Doesn't matter. But it's finding those areas that they're not there all the time, but letting those areas occur. I think that's very much part of what it is to accept the task of writing. But I'm 72. It's taken me a while.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Cole.
Thank you, Brandon.
Brandon, thank you for coming on.
No, nothing, guys.
On the Ed and Dave podcast.
Thanks so much.
Any last words?
Well, let's see what we can do. Let's see. I hope this works out for you guys. And let's get together as soon as we can.
We'll get together as soon as we can.
Yeah, please.